Hey, it's me, GV, and welcome to a brand new type of video on this channel, ladies and gentlemen. This time we're going to be ranking all 7 Soulsborne Sekiro Ring games, starting with Demon Souls, then going to Dark Souls 1, then going to Dark Souls 2, then Bloodborne, then 3, then Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and then Elden Ring. Yes, I'm including Sekiro. Yes, it is the most different. There are things in Sekiro that I feel like overlap with the Soulsborne stuff, and I just want to include it. I really like that game. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this video. And if you enjoy this video, consider checking out my Patreon and my Twitch in the description below. We just recently played through all of these Soulsborne games, so if you'd like to be a part of maybe a future ranking video where we play through a series, go ahead and follow that Twitch up. I'm live almost every day. So coming up at number 7, we have Demon's Souls, and specifically the PlayStation 5 remake, because I have never played the original PlayStation 3 game that was exclusive to the PlayStation 3. A lot of people have not played the PlayStation 3 version. A lot of people don't even know that there's a game that precedes Dark Souls 1, and that is in fact Demon's Souls, which of course Blue Point Studios recently remade for the PlayStation 5, and boy is it a perfect video game. You might be saying, well, if it's a perfect video game, then why is it ranked last on this list? Mainly due to its simplicity. It is by far the shortest. I mean, we'd have to take a look at the game lengths. I'm not actually sure if it's the shortest, but it feels the shortest. And it is definitely the simplest out of all of these games. It is the least mechanically intensive, and the bosses are very much just walk into the boss room and whack it until it's dead. There's not a lot going on there. Sometimes there is with certain bosses like the old monk and some others that I won't spoil, but for the most part the bosses are pretty one note, which for that time is absolutely fine. This was the first entry in the series, and the reason it is last on this list for me is just because, yeah, it's the most rudimentary. It's where everything started. But holy crap, that sound and those visuals with this game, specifically again the remake, beautiful. I think this is genuinely the most beautiful condensed Souls game. There are other entries in the series that do certain aesthetics better, but this is the best one in terms of the overall package, I would say. Moving on to number 6, we have Dark Souls 2. I'm sure there are people that expected Dark Souls 2 to be the easy bottom of the list, but no, Dark Souls 2, in my opinion, is actually a fantastic video game. It is just the weakest specific Souls game. I think that it has a lot more to offer than Demon's Souls because it's a much more beefier game, but in general it is by far the weakest Souls game, and definitely the black sheep. If you don't know the sort of mysticism around this game and the community, the sort of attention that it gets, you are living under a rock, or at least have not played too much of these Soulsborne games. Obviously, we'll start with the negatives. This one has the most bizarre design choices and easily the most flaws out of any of the other games. Putting rolling onto a stat is still the biggest slap in the face to every Souls fan out there, as well as just a lot of copy and paste of enemies. Just instead of having like specific hard challenges, you have a lot of just rooms where, hey, there's just a lot of this one type of enemy, which isn't really the Souls design. It's more so, you know, a perfect example is when you come down the elevator in Dark Souls 3 and you fight that Boreal Knight. It's just a one-on-one that's very difficult, whereas in Dark Souls 2, they would just kind of copy and paste just like a whole bunch of dudes in that one room. Dark Souls 2 has sporadic level design, which may be a positive for some. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm definitely somebody that enjoys the variety of different locales and visuals, but at the same time, it definitely does feel like it's just kind of all over the place in terms of how the game looks and how the game feels to navigate. I think this game's greatest positive is the sheer amount of builds, weapons, and armor sets. There is so much that you can do in Dark Souls 2. It was actually a joy recently integrating a poll into my Twitch channel to see what people would choose for my build, and they ended up going with Power Stance, which is a very cool component of Dark Souls 2 where you can dual wield the same weapon type and have a unique move set for that weapon combo. Very weak bosses. I think that's probably, outside of the odd design choices and flaws of this game, that would be the biggest issue, is the bosses are largely forgettable. Definitely quantity over quality here. There are so many bosses in Dark Souls 2, and almost all of them have like 2 or 3 attacks where they basically are just trying to hit you with a big wind-up. And one last note about Dark Souls 2, the DLCs are fantastic. There are 3 of them. There's also an alternate version of the game called Scholar of the First Sin, with a lot of remixed items and enemy placements. And yeah, the 3 DLCs, the King DLCs, are really, really good. Some of the best content in Dark Souls 2, except for Horse Bleep Valley. Everybody knows, if you know, you know, Horse Bleep Valley does not bleep around. It is, oh boy, still nightmarish from that place. At number 5, we have Dark Souls, the first Dark Souls game, which is very bizarre for me to put at number 5, but however, I must be objective, and playing through all these games recently and looking back, I would say this is the next logical spot. This is the next logical game for this spot. It is the most nostalgic and most impactful for me personally, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, considering it's Dark Souls. But I do have to put it at the number 5 because the other games would go on to grow exponentially in terms of the mechanics, the visuals, all the components of gameplay. This map has an unforgettable map layout, an interconnected map, unforgettable moments, and an unforgettable difficulty curve. It is the experience for somebody to jump into the Souls genre. Is it the one that I would say everybody should start with? That kind of depends on a variety of factors, but if you can get your hands on Dark Souls Remastered, I would say it's a good one to start with. If you can't get your hands on Demon Souls for the PlayStation 5, which you might as well just start at the beginning. But yeah, the experience of playing through Dark Souls for the first time is something that really is unique about this specific entry in the series. Going back, it's a bit simplistic like Demon Souls. Unfortunately, some of the bosses don't hold up so well. There is a certain late game boss that makes everybody want to pull their hair out, and a lot of them are very Demon Souls-esque, where it's just a big monster in a room that's trying to smack you. These mechanics would be expanded upon in the future, so that's a bit of a negative. Also, the last fourth of the game is definitely super weak compared to the rest of the game. This is something that's very well known in the Souls community, but going back and playing this game so many times, I really have to agree. The last fourth of the game is super weak and definitely my least favorite part. But yeah, I really want to put this game higher. Unfortunately, I can't. This is really the game that kicked everything off, and that's obviously huge. Moving right along, we have Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. This is easily the most difficult game in the entire series, and definitely the most different. If there's people watching this video right now that are going, that shouldn't really belong in this list, I kind of agree with you. This game could definitely be reviewed separately and in its own right. However, there are certain overlapping things, specifically the boss fights, that makes it sort of in the same general area with the rest of the Soulsborne ring games, so I'm just putting it in this video because I like this game a lot. This game has some of the best bosses in the entire series, with an entirely different gameplay style, basically all centered around perfect parrying, deflecting instead of blocking with your shield or using the variety of builds in the other games. You basically have to time your deflects with the L1 and then sort of time your attacks. It's a very give and take sort of game. Clink, 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 and then now you go on the offensive, which hopefully if you've played the game you understand, because that sounds crazy. But yeah, it has some of the best bosses in the series specifically because of this gameplay style. Some of the most satisfying bosses in the series once the gameplay clicks for you, because you just really get into the flow of that deflect, 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 attack, attack, use your prosthetic, deflect, 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 double jump, Makiri counter. It's so wonderfully done. The only thing I would change about it is I really wish they had different color icons appear for the double jump, Makiri counter, and grabs, and a different way to counter each one, specifically the grab, because there's no counter for the grab other than dodging away. But yeah, once the combat flows in this game, it is a work of art, truly. And yeah, this game's basically a masterpiece. It won Game of the Year, and honestly, it still feels underappreciated. If you have not played Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, it is fantastic, albeit, in my opinion, easily the hardest game in the series. Coming in at number 3, we've got Bloodborne. This is probably in the top 3 for most people. Bloodborne is the cool one. It is the cool uncle, the super cool, flashy family member that everybody likes. Bloodborne is by far the most stylish. Hell, I have a tattoo that features prominently the astral clock tower right there. It definitely leaves probably the biggest impact outside of Elden Ring, I would bet. But that doesn't make it perfect. Really, what pulls this into the 3rd spot for me personally is the weak bosses. I don't want to spoil in this video, but there are some very weak bosses that are just a bit of a chore and annoying to go through each playthrough of Bloodborne. Whereas I feel like the other games we haven't listed yet have a more solid flow of bosses that are exciting and challenging to go through. Bloodborne has some very, very good bosses, some of the best in the series, especially in the DLC, but it also has a handful of ones that I'm just like, okay, time for this one. It's not challenging at all, or it's just hyper annoying, or it's just a chore to go through. Bloodborne has the fastest Soulsborne combat out of everything except for Sekiro. And once that clicks, it is so satisfying to play. Because if you go from Souls to Bloodborne, you're in for a bit of a surprise. Because you're going to be trying to play the slower paced Dark Souls gameplay, whereas Bloodborne, you have to be aggressive. They have that built-in rally mechanic where the more you attack, the more health you refill. They have limb staggering and all sorts of stuff that really promotes hyper aggression. And once you tap into that, it's some of the most satisfying gameplay in the series. Really fantastic DLC. I definitely recommend playing it if you have not. And some of the best story and lore out of all these games. So again, it's the stylish one. It's not the one that has overall my favorite environments. It's not the one that overall has my favorite bosses, but it's the one that has some of the highest highs. And I think I look at this game a little more objectively than a lot of people do, because again, it has that cool factor, so people want to say it's the best. But for me, it's in the 3rd spot. And now we get down to crunch time, the final 2 games. Which one's it going to be? For those keeping track, you know, slot number 2 has to be this or that. Slot number 1 has to be this or that. So what is slot number 2 for me personally? It's going to be Elden. No, just kidding. It's Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is my number 2 out of 7. This is, in my opinion, the most solid, handcrafted Souls experience to date. Elden, more so than Elden Ring, but Elden Ring has the advantage that it's obviously open world, Breath of the Wild-esque, where Dark Souls 3 is that much more classical, traditional style of Souls game where you go through kind of these levels and, you know, go through that sort of progression. Just like Dark Souls 2, this game has tons of builds, weapon options, armor options, content, environments. This one is just chock filled to the brim with so much stuff, and I feel like the closest one to that would be Dark Souls 2. Outside of Elden Ring, because again, Elden Ring's a little bit of its own thing. But yeah, the amount of sheer content and fun build types in Dark Souls 3 is probably what takes it over Bloodborne for me personally. The Ring City DLC is a masterpiece, one of the best DLCs ever made in history, in my opinion. Ashes of Ariandel is also very good, but doesn't hold a candle to the Ring City. So once again, FromSoft knocks it out of the park with the extra content. My chat disagrees with me about this, which I, to be honest, flat out don't understand, but there's such a variety of cool locations to go through and experience, and some people in my chat say that that's their biggest negative, that the game looks the same, and I really disagree with that. I like that it's bleak, and I like that there is a wide variety of places to go to, and they are some of my favorite places in all of Soulsborne. I also think this game probably has the strongest boss list out of every Soulsborne Sekiro Ring game. It's close with Elden Ring, I feel like, but I do feel like Dark Souls 3 has the most solid experience when it comes to bosses. Sure, there are a handful of gimmick bosses, but I don't even mind them that much because visually they're awesome. And yeah, there's like one boss I can think of without spoiling that's kind of a little bit of a letdown, but overall, including the DLC, in my opinion, this is the best boss list on the roster. And yeah, this game basically would be an untouchable masterpiece if it wasn't for number one, of course, Elden Ring. The hype around this game, if you were not tapped into it, you had to be living under a rock. This was an astounding time to be a part of this, like to see the hype build and then to have a game release that actually delivered. Obviously, there's other games that we could talk about that did the exact opposite with that amount of hype built up for it. But yeah, in my opinion, Elden Ring definitely deserves Game of the Year. Also deserves just the sheer amount of attention that it got. It is an astounding masterpiece. It really is. My biggest negative for Elden Ring is the reuse of bosses and the use of enemies as bosses. I hate when games do that, when they take an enemy from later in the game and they just make it a boss and they don't change anything about it. There's like, what, 165 or so bosses in Elden Ring, and I don't know, half of that are just kind of like throwaway, forgettable stuff. That's my biggest negative by far. Outside of that, this game is immaculate. It is astounding to behold and astounding to go through. Tons of Breath of the Wild-esque little weird things to find in the world that are so creative. It goes against the Ubisoft, design of open world games. Not to say that that's bad, but just to say that this is truly a unique open world game, just like Breath of the Wild is a truly unique open world game. So many weird secrets and things to find. It's just awesome going through. And quite honestly, just a massive amount of content. Probably the most out of Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 2 in terms of, again, builds and weapons and weapon arts and armor sets. Some of them I do like in the other games more so. Like, I feel like I like Dark Souls 3's armor sets better than Elden Ring's armor sets, but overall, just the sheer amount of content, the areas, the bosses, everything about it is, just really, really, really delivered, and it's an unforgettable experience, and the height of everything that is building up till this moment. Elden Ring takes the number one spot. And that's my list, ladies and gentlemen. That is ranking all of the Soulsborne games, Soulsborne Sekiro Ring games, with gameplay. Very different video than what I normally do, Let's Play content. Basically, I've just needed a break, and I wanted to challenge myself to make better content, more edited with gameplay involved and stuff like that. So how did you like this video? I would love to look at the comments and see what people think about this one in terms of their opinions on the Soulsborne games, my opinions on the Soulsborne games, and also this new direction of content. Do you like it? Do you want to see more? Etc., 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 etc. Make sure to check out the Patreon and Twitch links in the description below if you'd like to go the extra mile and support me in what I do. And I guess that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.